Welcome to Revolution on a Recliner. I'm John Conrad. We are recording today at the Shared Universe podcasting studio right here in Eatontown, New Jersey. And I'm going to be chatting with none other than Alex Snitker from the Unattended Baggage podcast. How's it going, Alex?
I'm doing pretty good, John. How you doing?
Oh, beautiful. Amazing. So, Alex, you're a former Marine. You were the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate in Florida in 2010.
That's correct.
You were the co-host of the Liberty Underground radio show.
You're batting 1,000.
You also were, for a time, you were the vice chairman of the Libertarian Party of Florida.
That's true.
You were also the co-founder of the Liberty First Network, which is a liberty-minded legislative advocacy group in Florida.
That's correct.
You also were the co-author of the Neighborhood Project, which is a book about organizing and executing activism strategies at the precinct level. In 2018, you became the executive director of the Libertarian Caucus.
Or the Republican Liberty Caucus.
Yes, sorry. Republican Liberty Caucus. And like I mentioned before, you're also the co-host of the podcast Unattended Baggage, along with Adrian Wyllie.
That's true.
All right, so you've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's been a pretty extensive amount of time involved in politics in the last decade.
How do you do all that stuff and still live, like, because you have a wife and a kid and all that, how do you manage all that?
Well, a lot of that stuff that you're talking about now is no longer.
Okay.
So it was, because, the Liberty First Network is not something that I'm doing anymore. I'm actually making my way more out of politics. The one thing that's current is the podcast.
Okay. And the Republican Liberty Caucus, are you still the director?
I'm still involved with what they're doing, but I'm not taking as active of a role as I used to take.
Okay.
So I'm still involved. I'm still doing things for them, but I'm not doing as much as I was doing for a time.
Okay, got it. Okay. All right. So when we met in 2010 during your campaign, at the time I was just starting to discover libertarianism, and I was more of a mainstream Republican. But I knew that my understanding of politics wasn't complete, so I kept, exploring, kept reading, and eventually I wound up a little bit more libertarian. So, but years before, I was actually a leftist, up until about 1998 when I discovered talk radio. So could you tell us about your political journey from your very first political leanings up until now?
Yeah, okay. So when I first was not active in politics, but when I first kind of dealt with politics, I would say I was probably more of the light libertarian, light neoconservative-ish area. And what I mean by that is that I was in the Marine Corps. I believed in the mission. I was in from 93 to 01, so I was in before September 11th. And so after September 11th and we were bombed, I would say that I definitely took the neocon outlook of it, where I think we should go fight them over there, refuse to acknowledge anything that might have led up to it, and was ignorant of the history of our involvement overseas in that time. But I would say that in 2008 is really when, because I've always been leaning libertarian, where I do believe that people should be free to live their lives as they see fit for the most part. And then I didn't want the government involved in things. And I really, and socially, I was definitely on I don't really care what people do. It's their business, not my business. However, Ron Paul in 2008 in his campaign was really probably the thing that got me to focus on the principles more than anything else, and to get me to understand maybe more of where I was at as far as ideologically went, and how do you get there from what my thought process was at the time. And so that got me on the journey of, going down libertarianism, as it were, up until the point now where, I'm at that point now where I really do feel that government really can't provide any solutions to any of these problems, and that what we really need is to get the government out of our lives individually as much as humanly possible. I've moved myself in the direction to try to be involved in the free market in the aspects in which you can make the biggest difference namely being the healthcare area and somewhat education, but that's just more personal for our own kids. But I've went from like I went from basically libertarianish slash neocon but Republican to libertarian to basically now a minarchist slash anarchist, not really looking for government solutions, but maybe more to try to help your fellow man in in the best voluntary way that you possibly can. I think the biggest principles that I believe in now are voluntary association and property rights. Those are the two big keys for me. At least that's kind of, if that answers your question about how I got to where I'm at from where I was.
Sure. But would you say that Adrian's probably more along the lines as far as like an anarcho-capitalist and all that?
Adrian,
right?
full on, he
Okay.
went full Carlin, what we call it now. So he went full Carlin, and he sees no solution in any of it. He wants nothing to do with anything political whatsoever. He is an anarchist in the truest sense of the word.
Now, it seems to me that libertarianism is basically the only political philosophy that is so split between former Democrats and former Republicans, or former leftists and former neocon right wingers. What is it about libertarianism that allows this to happen?
I think the best way that you could look at how you get people from both sides is that they get so disgusted with the process in its entirety that they believe that there is just no solution within it. So I think that the best way that you could look at how you get those from the left and from the right is that aspect. Because if you look at what drives some of the ideologically like the youth on the left and the youth on the right, they're talking a lot about like income inequality. But there's one way in which you can get income inequality, which is the corporatism. Well, corporatism is something that libertarians also want to fight against. And the corporatism and using government to gain special favor for yourself is something that many times people on the left will point to as the reason or rationale why they believe in what they believe in. Like if you look at the complaints of a guy like Bernie Sanders, where he talks about, the billionaire class getting, doing special things, and some of the problems in which Bernie Sanders points to, you won't hear disagreement with some libertarians as to the problem. What you'll have massive disagreement on is the solution. So
Yeah.
if people show empathy towards the plight that someone has and just has a different way to get to the solution to it, I think you can get people on board your way of thinking. Also with libertarianism, because if there's people that are against like the right wingers or the Republicans because of the social aspect of it, the gay marriage aspect, or relationships between individuals where they want to use government in order to force their particular beliefs onto another person. Libertarianism is something where people are free to live their life as they see fit, as long as they're not hurting anybody else. So if you're gay, again, the gay marriage thing is actually a really good example of this, is that our solution to that problem isn't to force you to either accept or deny that gay people can get married. It's that the government as a construct doesn't have any role to play in who you marry, and that to allow the government that much into your life should be the thing that everyone's upset about. And that, people that are reasonably thinking about this issue are able to look at that issue and say, well, of course the libertarians are correct, because if you have a problem with getting the government out of it, well, then you have an agenda one way or the other. So the people that are honest players in that game will agree with us on both sides. Will agree with us on that. So I think those are a couple issues where you can see, people coming together. There was Austin Peterson put this so eloquently, is that he supports the right of a gay married couple to guard their marijuana crops with automatic weapons.
There you go. That's the America I want to live in.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's key what you said before, where I guess the message that has to be put through to people who could possibly embrace libertarianism is the fact that we have the same concerns, for the most part, as the Democrats do and as the Republicans do. We just have different solutions.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're more honest solutions too. I mean, not honest, but yeah, no, I think it's honest. Honest is a good word for it. Is that, if a lot of times you'll get the thought process where, they'll call like libertarians like, heartless or whatever word you want to use to demean them, because they say they don't care. But does it really show caring to want to take money from other people to solve a problem? Or does it mean more if you're going to spend your own money to try to solve a problem? Like, does it make you somehow morally superior because you want to use the force of government to do something that you consider to be a good thing?
Hmm. Now, my next question, I think, sort of ties into what you're saying, or could be an extension of it. What do you think? Now, I asked you what specifically about libertarianism could allow people from both sides to come into the fold, so or attract people from both sides of the political spectrum. But now this question is, what's the difference in the actual person? What's the catalyst where somebody does leave the leftist plantation or the Republican plantation and comes into the libertarian Holy Land? Like, what happens in that person's life that somehow these things become more clear? What's the catalyst?
That's so varying and so different for each person that it's really hard to even kind of acknowledge any one thing. I will say, I think that what it comes down to is that people will decide at a certain point that enough is enough, and that they've given up. I don't want to say given up, like they've maybe sometimes the real failure is the failure to realize. And I think maybe that kind of saying may have a little bit of a answer to the question that you're asking, is that for each person, I think it really does come down to acknowledging that, like, we're never going to elect heroes. We're never going to elect anyone in reality that's going to solve our problems. That your problems in life are not something to where some government bureaucracy is going to make it better for you. And that once you come to that realization, then you start looking at other options. And I think that might be, and I mean, this is something more of an ideological thing, not even a party affiliation thing. But I think that might be the best answer I could probably give to you, because it's really tough to decide, or really tough to figure out what each person's motivations are as to why they get to where they're disgusted with the entire process. But it does come down to, I think, having to just end up being disgusted with everything, and realizing that neither the right nor the left are really going to bring you a good solution here,
Mm-hmm.
that you really have to find the solution somewhere else.
I don't disagree with anything you just said, but what I would add to that is one very simple and obvious thing, I think, is reading the right books as well. Reading economics, reading history, and doing it on your own, not taking a class in college or in high school or whatever, where you're just doing you're reading what they're telling you to read, and you're basically being force-fed conclusions from whatever you were told to read from your professor, your teacher, whatever. I think the biggest difference of everyone that I know that cares about politics and talks about politics and posts things on Facebook about politics, the one common thread between all libertarians, as far as I see, are people who have actually put forth a lot of effort. They put some actual elbow grease into reading about particularly economics. I would imagine that would be the foundation for most people's movement towards libertarianism. Do you agree, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying right there. Is that trying to have a good understanding of economic theory, or just of the principles of liberty themselves. I think that starting to do that kind of investigation is definitely part of it. I wouldn't disagree with that at all.
It reminds me of all of these Trump people that I feel a lot of kindred with them. Like I like a lot of these people. Um, I I speak to a lot of these people very often, and I even host a meetup group here where I live, where I'm trying really to gather anybody who's not a leftist for just social interaction and connection and networking, that kind of thing. But it's really hard because when you talk about some of these things that that libertarians are fully versed on, a lot of times you mention these things to these people and they've never even heard of it, you know? So I think a lot of these Trumpians and these MAGA warriors, they have good intentions. I think their heart's in the right place. I just think they need to do a little bit more research, but maybe that's just me. Um, let me ask you, one of the key components of libertarianism is something called the non-aggression principle, or NAP for short, NAP. What is NAP?
All right, what it is in essence is that you will not force yourself upon others for political gain. That you won't, you won't aggress upon others in order to advance yourself. That it's the NAP is the non-aggression principle. Basically, is that you're not going to force your views or yourself, or you're not going to use government to force your views upon others. And it's the cornerstone of the political philosophy in and of itself.
Do you believe in NAP, in the NAP?
I mean, kind of. I mean, look, here's the thing. I believe in voluntary association and property rights. So I guess in that aspect, that could be two ways in which you would view the NAP of, because I don't believe that you should be able to force people to belong to any kind of group or organization. So I guess I do believe in it per se. I just think it's almost too basic to try to like, it's almost too basic of a thing to try to hedge your entire political philosophy around. And I do think that within the Libertarian Party as a political organization, that the NAP in and of itself, funny enough to say it this way, that the NAP in and of itself is used sometime as a weapon to beat other people over the head with. And so I have chosen to stay away from utilizing, the NAP or try to explain it to people, only because of the kind of bad, the way that I've seen it used within the political party itself. And also, I'm not in the Libertarian Party as a political party anymore either. So,
Okay, so let me ask you, have you ever violated the NAP since you've become a libertarian?
I'm sure I have.
Okay. It kind of reminds me of how the left uses racism as their battering ram against anybody who they want to, that they disagree with, and they want to shut down conversation,
Yep, that's true. That's a good way to look at it.
And sometimes it seems almost like a libertarian dick measuring contest, who's more libertarian than the next one. So, all right. So on your podcast, one of your recent podcasts I was listening to, you mentioned a speech that was given by Senator Marco Rubio. Okay.
Yeah.
And he gave the speech in November, and it was called The Catholic Social Doctrine and the Dignity of Work. Okay.
Yes.
Now, I know you have a history with Marco Rubio. Well, we don't have to go down that entire thing, but he was the guy that you were actually, one of the guys that you were actually running against in 2010. So I know he's not one of your favorite people on the planet, but okay. So I read the speech, and it starts off bashing companies more or less, for being too concerned with profits and too concerned with keeping their shareholders happy, as opposed to keeping their employees happy, which in his opinion, I think he's trying to express that it would make for a better country if you cared more about your employees and less about your shareholders and that kind of thing. And then it goes on to, at the end, it's some call to unite against the growing threat of China and this kind of thing. So let me ask you, what did you take away from this speech? What do you think his actual point was, and what irked you about it?
Okay, so I think that the point of the speech was that they were laying that he and those that believe in the same thing that he believes in are laying the groundwork for what is to come after Trump leaves the GOP. At a certain point, like either 4 years or 8 years, that Trump will no longer be the president, and that he will create a vacuum in his exit. And so this is the emergence of the maturation of the neocon political theory that they're going to try to implement after Trump is gone. So that's what I think, and I think this is the opening shot. I think this is the opening salvo that they're going to be doing, and that it really is this is going to be to try to eliminate any libertarian influence that is within the GOP right now, where if you look at it, like when Reagan, to go back into the 80s, so when Reagan built a coalition within the Republican Party, one of the stools or one of the legs of that was libertarian economic theory. And the neocons like Rubio really view this in the negative aspect. They don't want anything to do with free markets that aren't completely controlled and regulated by the government. and by his, Catholic doctrine theory. And if you listen to that speech, that was very similar. Like, he had the same themes that people like Bernie Sanders have. Like, he really did have a lot of similarities between the way he talked and the way Bernie Sanders talked, where they really don't have any respect whatsoever for the free market, and that they view like instead of you viewing organized religion as something that is done voluntarily, where people find organized religion, he wants it to be implemented at and enforced at the governmental level. And so I think that really is what he's trying to do. And the stuff that the group has come out with, because they now have the thing called the Compass Group, I think is the name of what it's called, that has gotten a bunch of people together basically to start a new think tank, which is what happens. This is in order for these political theories to get, to maturate within society. What they do is they create these think tanks. These think tanks put out papers. They have politicians that are out there, putting these things forward, and then they're trying to adjust theory from that. And so this is what Rubio's doing, and they really are trying to do this in a way to because Trump he did change the dynamic of the Republican Party, where there's much more of a nationalistic tendency. Some of the free trade principles have gone away, and it's been a seismic shakeup within the GOP, to where when he leaves, it is going to create that vacuum. And he's looking, and Rubio, the neocon that he is looking to fill that vacuum when it's all over.
Yeah, I kind of got that vibe too from the speech. It does seem like he's going to expand upon a lot of what Trump is all about, but he's going to take it to the next level, and it's much more about actual corporatism and social welfare, as opposed to Trump's thing where, I mean, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but the way he frames what he's trying to do for the country is just, make America great again, where Rubio is going to take it to the next level, and it's going to be all about a lot of what Bernie is pushing, where we have to make sure everybody has the house with the 2 kids, the dog, and everyone can afford to go to vacation twice a year. And so they're going to forcefully create this magic land where everyone's happy, everyone's healthy, and everyone has a good income and that kind of thing. So I guess you're right. It's like it's the next wave of populism, but a much worse version of it. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that what Rubio talked about was definitely much more along the lines of fascism, and that if you see what happened, like in Germany, in the build up to the Nazis taking over, was you had communists that were going up against fascists, and so what you have is Bernie Sanders, who represents communism, against Marco Rubio, who represents fascism, and really they are two wings of the same bird. Mm-hmm. But these two competing ideologies, they both agree on one thing, and that is that freedom of association and property rights are things that the government can override at any time, as long as they're doing it for their means and not for any other reason. It's just whatever they think is the best thing to do is what they're going to do, and they are willing to use the force of government to get their way. That's where a lot of times, like if you see, like when people like us are attacked, right? That they will either the people on the right will equate us to the left, or the people on the left will equate us to the right. You know what I mean? Like they'll separate ourselves out, because they realize, and I think that they actually do realize, that our philosophy is the philosophy that is consistent, and that at the end of the day, our philosophy is consistent because we have faith in humanity. Neither one of these sides has enough faith in humanity to allow people to control themselves. That what they really want to do is they want to be able to control people, because they believe that they know better than that other person as how they should live their life, and that they should be able to utilize the force of government in order to get that person to live the correct way. So they will paint this panacea of, this is going to be all great, and everybody's going to be good, and everybody's going to get this and get that, and do this. But in all reality, they're not going to be able to promise that. The only thing they're going to be able to promise is control, and that they will be able to control, and that with that control, they will tell you what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And if you get out of line, they will throw you in a cage.
Mm-hmm. And I think they're also trying to steal some of the thunder from the Democrats as well. You know what I mean? They're trying to take some of their power away from them, where, okay, now we can be a hybrid of the Republican and Democrat Party, but not in a good way, in a bad way, where we're actually going to use control and force to offer a lot of the stuff that the Democrat Party is always promising to the people, but now it's in a Republican package. So now we're going to rule the universe because we're gonna offer goodies to everybody like the Democrats do. So it's a never-ending grab for power, and I just don't see how this is going to play out in a good way. And I think it's going to. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of faith in the American people, and I think it's actually going to be widely accepted, and people are going to vote for it.
Yeah, stock up on marshmallows.
Yeah, I hear you. But let me say this, though. I have to be honest, when I was reading the speech, I had mixed feelings about some of the sentiment. Now, I obviously don't agree in using the force of government to steal wealth away from wealthy people like the socialists, the communists, and the Democrats do. I definitely don't believe in that. But at the same time, I'd be a liar if I didn't say at times, I can see some of what he's saying, where I've always said that some of the worst enemies of capitalism are actually really rich people who live unbelievably, insanely extravagant lives. And sometimes it feels like they're rubbing it in the face of less fortunate people. And, it can generate animosity and angst and confusion and anger amongst regular working class people. So it's not that I don't see that and I don't feel that. Sometimes I think these people almost deserve to get, a gun pointed at their fucking head. And no, we're going to redistribute some of this shit, asshole, because you're just insanely rich. I get that, but I just don't think that's a system that works. And in the end, it's unethical because it's not mine, it's theirs. So
Yeah, we should never. What we should look, the envious nature inside of man is something that will always be there. It is not something that's going to go away. What we don't want to do is to allow the envious nature of man to be codified within law in government that can be used as a weapon against our fellow man.
And I think the only way for people to understand that is for them to research, read, and do the hard work that it takes to actually understand free markets, individual liberty, and private property. So,
well, but also to make sure that we are fighting for a political system. If we're going to fight for a governmental system, is one that is as fair as possible. And what I mean by fair is that the rules are applied evenly across the board. That there are definitely people that are rich people that are utilizing government in order to become rich, and that those people should be punished for what they've done in violation of other people. That if you are let's see how I can say this the right way. So let's look at like the BP oil spill, right? Is that company should have went out of business because they should have been sued to the point where they were out of business. Because what we've done within law is that we've created moral hazards that have allowed for companies to basically mark off something as the cost of doing business in order to hurt other people. That because we've allowed those people to create like, well, if we do this, it's only going to cost us this much money, but we'll make this much money to do it. So it's worth us to do that action. Like if you look at the oil spill for BP, they knew that even that the cost that they had, which we thought was an exorbitant cost, is that they were still able to not really, I don't want to say not give a crap, but they didn't go out of business. BP should have been put out of business because of that. That the threat of that is the thing that will keep people in line, and that we've far too often enact laws that create moral hazards, and we have to get rid of those things.
That laws that protect the corporations and that kind of thing.
Yeah. There's certain the laws that are in protection of them that stop from the civil litigation or from suing them is the thing that really is a kind of a problem, and that gives the neocons like Rubio, and it gives the people like Sanders more fuel that they can use in order to kind of point to the problem and say and allow for the politics of greed and envy to permeate within, and they use that greed and that envy that's inherent in every human in order to advance their own political power.
But now you're starting to sound like a leftist.
What do you mean?
I'm just kidding. I mean, that does sound sort of similar to like something you would hear from like a Occupy Wall Street or something like that. But
Yeah.
going back to what we were saying before, though, that, if you look at things in an honest way, you can fall on either side of the political spectrum. It's just more about what the actual real solutions are.
Yeah, no, it's true. It really does come down to, it does come down to solutions. I always look at it, it was, again, I hate to quote Pindulette, even though it's great to quote Pindulette because he actually is very, very smart. But, if you, it can more freedom solve the problem? Like when you come up with one of these problems, can more freedom and liberty solve it instead of more government regulation?
Mm-hmm.
That if you start there, then I think you'll end up getting to the correct path. And you also have to have honest conversations with people. Again, people like Rubio and even people like Bernie Sanders, I wouldn't even say that they're having an honest conversation. I do believe that these people are very dishonest in what their true intentions are. And that if you are going, but I think the people that support them, a lot of those people, I do believe, are just trying to make a better world for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That they're not, they're in it because they think that these people are providing the correct solutions.
Yeah. So in the speech, he keeps saying, he keeps using the term dignified work, dignified work. He said it over and over. What does he mean by dignified work? Does that just mean work that pays well? Does that mean like a quote unquote living wage? Does it mean that you make enough that that you don't necessarily have to have a 2-income family? Is that all he means by that? Because if he does mean that, somebody needs to explain to him how government intervention into the economy and government inflation of the dollar, which is basically the reason, one of the biggest reasons why our money is worthless, why it doesn't have as much purchasing power. And government intervention into certain segments of the economy always drives the price of service and goods up in that sector. Would you agree?
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you on that. I totally agree with you on that. I think the reason he uses things like that is because I think that it was a good buzzword that will get people to, in order to get people on board with what he's thinking. I think he uses that thing of dignified work as a way in which to get those people over. I don't think he could really define it very well anyway. But I think that what you're talking about is definitely, again, if you looked at what dignified work means, or why our dollars aren't nearly as valuable as they used to be, that the inflation of the Federal Reserve has a big amount to do with it. But that would totally unlock, the one thing that Rubio wouldn't want to do is to get rid of the Fed, because he wants to use the Fed for his own purposes.
Mm-hmm. And everything that the government touches when it comes to the economy, it distorts that part of the economy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. Marijuana. Okay, so it's becoming much more legal, much easier to access legally all throughout the country. Some places it's completely legal, recreational and everything. Other places, you have medical marijuana. You can get the card. I don't really know what's involved in getting the card, but I'm going to assume it's not that difficult. And you have dispensaries popping up all over the place. That's happening here in Jersey as well. But you would think that once this started to take place, that the black market for marijuana would disappear. But the opposite is true, because the legal marijuana is much, much more expensive. It's the same marijuana, but you can get through the black market much cheaper product, because I would imagine because of regulation and taxes and licensing and all this stuff that goes into doing it legally.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to eliminate the black market entirely, and this is the in between phase of it being totally illegal to it being completely legal, and that it's going to take time to maneuver from where we were to where we're going to be at the end of the day. So you're still going to have that black market around, and each state's going to be a little bit different. Like Illinois has extremely high taxes upon their legal marketplace, so the illegal marketplace is still around. There's still a lot of states that are it is not legal at all, so you're still going to have the black market there. And the people that are part of the black market don't want to actually. I mean, they're still business people at the end of the day, so they still have to be. They still want to make money selling their illegal, their weed. So you're going to see a maturation, and it's going to take time. But at the end of the day, we're going to see the marketplace. The other thing also, when it comes to the legal market and the illegal market, because you said, well, basically it's the same thing, and it's not really, though. And what I mean by that is that the legal marketplace, you can buy much more, I don't want to say customizable, but you can buy the kind of weed, because different strains of marijuana do different things. You know, you have some that are much more of a hallucinogen, and some that, you know, that just treat your body differently, between, you know, indica or sativa, that you have it affects your body differently. So you can find the kind of high that you're looking for much better in the legal marketplace than in the illegal marketplace, because in the illegal marketplace, you're kind of just buying whatever you can get. You know what I mean? Whatever your dealer's selling you, that's just really what they're selling you, and you don't really get a whole lot of choices in the matter. And again, the legal marketplace is definitely a different animal. You know, as somebody who's bought in both the illegal and the legal marketplace, I can tell you it's a lot better to buy in the legal marketplace. You're paying a premium, but you're getting the kind of quality that you don't necessarily get from the illegal market.
Okay. Well, that's a fair way to look at it. It kind of takes some of the wind out of my sail of blaming it all on government intervention. But I get what you're saying. You're also getting sort of a different experience and different options if you buy it legally. I get it. So I guess.
Yeah, but hold on, but the government intervention though puts it in the black market, so there you can.
Yeah.
Your point is still valid about the government intervention having a problem.
But definitely you are going to pay a premium for more convenience. So that does make sense. All right, I'm going to switch gears. The Constitution. All right. Now, when I was part of your campaign back in 2010, that was a word that I must have heard come out of your mouth about 482 million times. Okay,
oh yeah,
that year. Do you still believe in the Constitution?
Yeah, I believe in the ideals of it still. I do. I think that, you know, I think that it's a good idea. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of politicians that believe that it's a good idea and that don't really want to abide by it on a federal level, being on the left or on the right. So I think that and I don't think it's a complete idea. Like, I wouldn't consider myself, like, if, you know, I think when I was running even in 2010, I would call myself a constitutional conservative. And I wouldn't use that term anymore. That if people ask me what my ideology is, I'll very generally say, well, I'm a libertarian. I don't try to get any more than that, because I think that even trying to get more than that just ends up confusing everybody of what you really believe. But I shy away from it as much now, because I just, like, for the people that end up agreeing with me about, what I've found is that a lot of people that will say that they're a constitutionalist aren't really a constitutionalist. And so you're almost arguing with people about their use of the word. And I think it takes away from the actual argument or the actual discussion that you could be having with people, instead of viewing people as, I'm a constitutionalist, you know, like, it's, you know, again, I wish those people knew what that meant. It would make it an easier conversation, but you know.
Well, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. I still, after all these years of reading, of being politically active, and trying to be as informed as I can, I still struggle with a lot of these ideas. Now, I know my podcast, I sort of put that out there a lot, but that's not a gimmick or just my branding, that I'm the dumb guy who's trying to understand big concepts. There's a lot of truth to that, okay? So I've been reading, here's my Constitution, what is it? U.S. Constitution for Dummies. I don't know if you can see that, Alex. And the one thing that I am confused about is I always understood that the Constitution was basically a restraint on the federal government. And that's
correct.
And that's all it's supposed to be. It has no bearing on states. So let's take the First Amendment, for instance. Probably the most important amendment. So the federal government cannot infringe upon your right of freedom of speech. But as far as I understood, that doesn't mean that the state technically can't. You would hope that they wouldn't. But as far as I understood the Constitution, that they have no bearing on that, because what happens in the state is the state's business. The Constitution just restricts what the federal government can do. And if that's the case, how come nobody else understands this?
Well, okay. I mean, and you bring up a great point, and I do agree with that. The Constitution, in and of itself, is only a limit on the federal government, and so what the states can do is different than what the feds can do. So the Constitution doesn't place a limit on the state from infringing on your rights. So that I would agree with that.
Okay.
Why don't people believe that as much? I think because one thing that both sides, whether the left or the right, agree on, which means that the one thing that they're teaching in schools and that is the overriding political thought is that we should be able to handle all of these things at a federal level. Like the Constitution should be the overriding law of the land, and that should dictate to the states. That it's to both sides' advantage to have the fight at the federal level and to not have the fight at the state level.
Okay.
Because like if you look at what's going on, like with like, give you two good examples, not two good examples, but when you look at what Obama was doing, that they were perfectly fine with the federal government coming in. The left was perfectly fine with the federal government overriding the states on a federal level when Obama was in office. But then when Obama got out of office, all of a sudden, then the states needed to resist what the president was doing and the federal overreach. Okay. Conversely, when Obama was in office, the Republicans were talking about states' rights and how that they had this big federal overreach from an administration. Mm-hmm. And then when Trump gets into office, all of a sudden they're really cool with it. The state versus federal power and the limits placed on it by the Constitution highlights one of probably the biggest hypocrisies in the political process that you can find.
Now, do you think that this is a fault of the Constitution itself? Because during that time, during your campaign, during the whole Tea Party thing, and even after, during the whole Ron Paul revolution, I came in contact and on social media with so many people who were basically Constitution worshipers, where according to them, it was like a handwritten document from God himself, and it was infallible. I don't know, man. Like I said, I'm reading my U.S. Constitution for Dummies book. I've read up about it as much as I could over the years. I try to understand the best I can. But is it really that perfect of a document? If it was so perfect, wouldn't people understand it a little bit better?
Well, I mean, okay. It's not, I wouldn't fault it. Your initial question was, do you fault the Constitution itself? And that, while I'll agree with you that there's no such thing as a perfect document, the fault lies more with us as a citizenry and less in the document itself. Is that because we've allowed ourselves to be, ignorant to the proper role of government, that's allowed those with ulterior motives that were more nefarious to kind of get in the way. Well, I mean, not get in the way is the right word, but to adjust it. It's like the 17th Amendment, right? It's like the amendment that had the senators to be voted on by the people in the states and not to be selected by the state houses within each state.
Why is that so important? Sorry to cut you off, but why is that so important? Because you always hear libertarians say that that's where things went wrong. Why?
Okay, the reason why is, in my opinion, the reason why that is very important is because you have to look at what the federal government and how the deliberative body was supposed to be made up. Is that you had one house, which was the House of Representatives. That was the people's house, right? So that means the people, via their elected representatives, and it was proportioned amongst population, would agree to a certain bill. And then you would have the Senate. Now, the Senate is made up of all the states, and that the states would then decide that this was a good bill as well. Well, if the states are deciding that it's a good bill, then what they should do is that they should elect, the members of the state bodies are appointing that senator to go up there and represent them, that both the state and the people, the states and the people, have decided that the bill is a good bill, which is why there's only 2 senators per state. And that if there's a big, massive federal overreach, then the states would be able to remove their senator, their representative, and replace their representative. That also means that the people, in order to get something done, would also focus their time and effort and their knowledge on who their state representatives are as well. That it almost took the ability of the influence that the state representatives actually had on the process at a federal level it took that part of it away, which is why it would be very important to get that part back again. And don't get me wrong, we're not going to get rid of the 17th Amendment anytime soon. Like we don't have a general population that's actually educated enough to even understand how senators got elected and why that process was so important. And nor do we care. The second we start bringing something like that up, people roll their eyes in the back of their head and they just move on. Like they don't give a crap about that kind of thing at all. Like it doesn't even matter for them to understand that. So I think that's one of the reasons why you see us in the position that we're in today.
All right. So I'm gonna have to actually listen to this podcast again to get the full understanding of what you just said. But we're gonna move on from here.
Okay.
So if I think I understand what you were kind of saying was there was a little bit more separation between the population and that whole apparatus there. But whatever, we're good. So what about the Electoral College? So there was so much frustration after the 2016 presidential election because Hillary got the popular vote, Trump got the Electoral College. Now everyone thinks that it's a travesty of justice, and we should, and the Electoral College, there's no reason for it to exist. Do you think that's a valuable part of the Constitution? Is that something that should be changed or done away with?
Well, no, I definitely don't think that we should don't do away with, because I don't agree with the people that think that this country is built on a direct democracy. I believe that this country is built as a representative republic, which is a totally different thing than a direct democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, like the thing is this, and I did hear a lot of those complaints about Clinton getting mad because she won the popular vote and she's mad because he won the Electoral College, but that was the rules that were done at the time. And if you look at the rules that were done at the time,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to adjust those rules going into it, like if you were to adjust the rules where everybody knew what the same rules were, how many people that would have voted for Donald Trump would have voted in states like California and New York that didn't vote because they didn't think that their vote mattered? So to try to say now that, well, if you were to make it, if you were to change the rules now, then Clinton would have won. That's not necessarily true if those rules were identified from the beginning. So again, I do believe that we are a representative republic and we're not a direct democracy. And so I don't disagree with the Electoral College. However, if we were to change the rules, there's nothing to say that Clinton would have won that election if the rules were changed in the beginning of it. I think that them trying to get rid of the Electoral College is really just, they want a direct democracy. The people that are on the other side of this issue that are calling for the elimination of the Electoral College, they do want a direct democracy. They do not agree with a representative republic. So they don't agree with the Constitution. They don't agree with any of this. They want a direct democracy. These are the same people that wanted to have direct elections of the senators. The same thought process that permeated through this country is what allowed for the 17th Amendment. I know we talked about it before. But that's the same argument that they're having. So it's the same argument that they're having right now when it comes to, well, we don't want a direct democracy. I mean, we want a direct democracy. We don't want to have this Electoral College. And the thing is this, if you listen to what these states are saying, so they're not trying to apportion California, by the way. They're still doing winner take all for California. It's just whoever wins gets the winner take all. So even this argument that you hear them having about getting rid of the Electoral College, they're only doing the part that benefits them at the time. They're not having an honest look at the entire process and then trying to change those parts of the process for the good and the bad. They're willing to screw the other guy over as long as it gives them a little bit of an advantage. And that really is what it comes down to, where I think it's very disingenuous on their side, a lot of the arguments that I hear about eliminating the Electoral College.
That's a really interesting point that I never considered. What you said about if the rules change, then the vote might actually change because people would know that they need to get out there and vote. So, yeah, very interesting. So let me ask you real quick. I'm going to try and run through rapid fire. Two topics that I know that libertarians many times disagree on, and there is a little bit of conflict, as far as I can see, within libertarian circles. First one being immigration. Where do you fall on immigration?
I think that we need to have a process to allow more people to come here legally, and that right now illegal immigration is incentivized and legal immigration is decentivized. And if we don't do it soon, the Ponzi scheme known as Social Security and Medicare are going to go away. So we better bring as many immigrants as we can.
Okay. But do you believe in an absolute open border, or you do believe
No,
in? Okay.
I don't. No, I don't. Look,
Okay.
I still believe in a border. Like I still
Okay.
believe in Merca. You know what I mean? Like I don't. I, I think it should be very easy to get into the country. I don't think it should be difficult to get in the country. But at the same time, I do think that there should be a process in which to get into the country.
So you're saying that me and you don't have to turn in our libertarian membership cards because we believe that there may be a role for federal government to actually monitor the border and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, I guess some people might want us to turn our cards in for that, but they can piss off.
Okay, cool. Um, what about abortion?
Abortion is something where I used to be really, really pro-choice. And since 2018, when I've seen how far the Democrats are going when it comes to abortion, they've actually made me a little bit more pro-life than I was before. I do think at the end of the day, the woman still should have the right to choose up to a certain point. But I think that when it comes to the viability of the fetus is where the line should be drawn. Once the fetus is viable, then the mother shouldn't be allowed to have an abortion. So I think right now I'm at the 20-week part. But with science, that's getting lower and lower.
I am definitely on the pro-life side of things, and I think there's I would say, a strong libertarian argument for that, believe it or not.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
see more and more and more libertarians actually coming over to the pro-life side. For some reason, I had assumed that you would have been absolute pro-choice. So
I
that's
was.
yeah. I think a lot of us have kind of evolved on that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think the legality of it is still a little, because we are libertarians. We don't like seeing anybody be thrown in jail for things that that aren't what we would consider worthy of that. So how you would implement that, how you would enforce those laws, I don't know. It's a lot of gray area and it's an uncomfortable conversation. But one thing I personally believe, because as far as the culture war is concerned, despite politics, I mean, despite law and government, just the culture we're talking about, I've evolved very, very strongly on the pro-life side, because I mean, I can't think of anything more more ugly, let's just say, to put it nicely, than doing that to what I believe is a baby.
Yeah.
So
I mean, here's the thing is I do try to stay away from that topic as much as possible. And I've
yeah,
never really gotten involved in the political fight on that one on any side for any length of time,
yeah,
nor am I going to start. It's one of those
yeah,
things where I stay away from it as much as I can because it's such a divisive issue. And I don't think you're ever going to come up with a good solution.
yeah.
I think that science is going to solve that problem more than any kind of law is. I think if you can pull the fetus out of the mother that doesn't want it anymore and allow the fetus to grow independently of the mother, that is the one thing that will get both sides to have some kind of an agreement on, I think.
Not necessarily. Well, maybe both sides of the libertarian circles, but not
Yeah.
necessarily in the Democrat area. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
they're
Or the
lot.
Republican area. I mean, it's a messed up situation.
Yeah, a lot of these people are good with killing the baby after it's actually out of the womb.
Yeah.
So, have you heard Walter Block speak on this as far as what he calls evictionism?
No, I haven't.
There was a debate. Do you know the Soho Forum?
I'm
Oh,
familiar with it.
so they had a debate where there was basically two libertarians, but one was absolute pro-life and no, variation from it. And Walter Block's view was he supports what he calls evictionism. And I thought I was going to oppose him vehemently, and I was never going to listen to another word he had to say about anything ever again. Turns out, I think he won the debate. And evictionism basically is based on what you just said, where science will eventually solve this problem because over time, the baby will be viable outside the womb at much earlier and earlier and earlier stages. So at this point, if you actually kind of put the pro-life thing to the side a little bit and support evictionism based on if it can live outside the womb, then you're not allowed to have an abortion no more. Eventually, there'll be no more abortions because eventually, I mean, I don't know about a week, or 2 weeks or something like that. That may never be possible, but who knows with science,
Yeah,
So
but here's the thing, though. When it comes to a week or 2 week thing, how many people would actually like? How many mothers would know at the
yeah,
week or 2 week point that it's so? I think if I'm not mistaken, it's actually hard to know at that point anyway. So,
yeah.
you know,
But at least the line will come back more and more and more towards, less abortions. But either way, are you following the LP candidates for president?
not a whole lot. I mean, I got to tell you, I have a favorite in the race. I do have a favorite
Is
right
it
now. I mean,
Hornberger?
Vermin Supreme. What's that?
Vermin Supreme?
Oh yeah, Vermin Supreme is definitely my favorite in the race.
Are you sure you're not a burn it down anarcho-capitalist? Because
Let me explain. Let me explain why. I'll explain why Vermin Supreme is the choice that I picked. Because I do think that what Vermin does is he highlights, like we've tried to put serious candidates up before, and I've seen serious candidate after serious candidate try to go up there, and they screw it up every time. I think that. Hold on. Let me see if I can give you a movie reference that actually kind of sums up why I've picked Vermin Supreme. Have you ever seen Kill Bill Volume 2?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. I don't
Do you
remember
remember
too well though.
Okay, there was a scene at the end that David Carradine did where he described his favorite comic book character, Superman.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with the scene at all?
No.
Okay, so basically what he does is he explains that in all the superhero genre, that Superman in the mythology of it stands alone in that, Bruce Wayne is really who Batman is. Peter Parker is really who Spider-Man is. But Superman is Superman. Clark Kent is is the hidden identity, and not the not his like if you understand what I'm saying is like
Okay.
Clark Kent in Clark Kent is in hiding within society, and Superman is who he really is.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, Clark Kent is unsure of himself. He's kind of a klutz. He's not very good at things. So Clark Kent is an indictment of humanity by Superman in trying to hide the way he's hiding. So if you look at Vermin Supreme, so if you understand that analogy and then look at Vermin Supreme, Vermin Supreme is us showing our entire disgust to the system by nominating someone as crazy as Vermin Supreme is. Now, Vermin Supreme isn't an idiot, though. He's not a stupid person. He's actually a smart person, because in order to be that crazy, because if you listen to Vermin, in order to be that crazy, you actually have to be intelligent enough to come up with a persona that's that crazy. And that, he's very quick-witted. He's very quick on his feet. He's very quick-witted. And I do think that by us putting forward someone like Vermin Supreme, that it will give us an indictment of the entire system. And I think at this point, the best things libertarians could do would be to indict the entire system, especially in this election cycle when you're going to have, Trump against whoever they're going to have. Like, would you really if at this point, a guy that is going to advocate giving away ponies with a boot on his head, you know what? I'll take that guy over a reality TV star or a communist or whoever the Democrats are going to put forward. Like, in all reality, I don't view Vermin as a bad option. I think that as long as it's played right. Now, I've seen the exit polling coming out of the states when it comes to who's going to be nominated in the straw polls, and I don't think that Vermin's going to have enough juice to actually pull it off. I do think a guy like Hornbreaker is probably going to end up pulling it off, but I really do hope that Vermin ends up winning the race. I actually bought a Vermin Supreme 2020 t-shirt, and I got a couple bumper stickers, actually.
For those that aren't aware of who Vermin
Vermin.
Supreme is, like Alex said, he's a guy who wears a boot on his head, and he looks like a wizard. And part of his campaign platform is he's going to give every American a pony.
Yeah.
He's a funny guy. Now, I could see that working one of two ways. If he doesn't get very many votes, then it's probably just going to set the LP back a few years, as far as respectability and all that kind of legitimacy. But if he gets a lot of votes, I think you're right. It's going to show what bullshit the entire system is, I mean, it's kind of sort of like Trump getting elected. I mean, that's kind of insane,
Yeah. If you're gonna have a protest vote, don't mess around with it. Have a real protest vote.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, let's run through a few things real quick because I know we're running long. Rapid fire style. Speaking of Trump, is there anything that he's done right?
Destroy or shake up the system as we know it. He's done that right.
I agreed, and I'll add to that part of the system. I would say is the stronghold that media has on legitimacy and information. I love how he just went around them with Twitter and he calls them out for being fake news and all that. I love it.
Yep.
What are a few of the biggest things he gets wrong? If you can pick only a few, or one.
See, how can I say this the right way? The executive overreach he always gets wrong, in my opinion. The fact that he just acts like such an a-hole, I think he gets wrong a lot too. And I think that the trade war stuff ends up being wrong many times. Mm-hmm. And he's gotten guns wrong.
Yeah, definitely. So are you voting Trump or Vermin Supreme?
Well, I mean, I don't have any vote in the Libertarian primary, so I don't know if Vermin's going to make it through or not.
Oh, okay, got it.
As far as voting in November of 2020, I don't know yet.
Okay.
I think it's pretty low that I'll pick Trump.
Okay.
It all depends on it. There is a lifetime away. I may leave it blank. I may vote for Libertarian. I don't really know right now.
I have said many times that it will probably come down to how many beers I have that night. So, are you doing anything special for election night?
No. I mean, we might do a show for that night. I don't know. I mean, it's so far away. I don't even know yet, but
okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Adrian's not going to vote at all, so like it doesn't it wouldn't be even. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but I mean, I guess I can't see it. Well, I can't see us doing a show on Tuesday either. So
yeah, it would probably be tough to do a show with Adrian on election night because he'd just be, he'd be very negative about the election and all that, and he would be, I think, a party pooper.
Yeah.
Do you believe in God?
Yeah.
Do you believe in love?
Yeah.
Do you believe in Sasquatch?
Yes.
Do you believe that Bruce Lee actually played ping pong with nunchucks?
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think he did. I saw the video and it just looks like he did. So, but I could be wrong.
Okay. And finally, do you believe Americans will ever believe in liberty? The majority of Americans.
Can you say the last sentence again? You kind of broke up.
Do you think that the majority of Americans will ever actually believe in liberty and free markets and that kind of thing?
Maybe. I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm going to say yes, but it's not like they're proving me right very often though.
Okay. Very last question for you. I believe the biggest difference between becoming a libertarian or not becoming a libertarian is simply reading books and the effort it takes to understand the concepts of free markets, individual liberty, and yada, yada, yada. So what 3 books would you strongly recommend? I'm not going to say require because you're a libertarian, but what 3 books would you strongly recommend every American read? Now, maybe there's a gun in the room, but you're not pointing it at anybody, but you're strongly, strongly, strongly recommending that all Americans read these 3 books.
iPencil, The Law, and Economics in One Lesson.
Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, The Law by Bastiat. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I still haven't read that. And iPencil, who's
by
that?
Leonard Reed.
Leonard Reed is iPencil.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect.
That's definitely the best 3 books you could probably read to get the best understanding you could.
Well, I'm going to go out and get all 3 and definitely share it with my audience. And Alex,
hold on. Just so you know, hold on real quick though. All 3 of those books are available for free at fee.com.
Oh, FEE.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on that website all the time. All right, I'll definitely look for them.
Yeah, I think you can download them for free. Like there's links for them and stuff like that if you want to do that.
Beautiful. Alex, thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure. And where can everybody follow you and everything that you're involved in? So
my main website is alexandersnicker.com, AlexanderSnitker.com. You can go there and find me there. We have the radio show Unattended Baggage. The podcast is unattendedbaggageradio.com. And between those 2 places, you can find me.
Beautiful. Thanks again, Alex. Talk to you soon.
My pleasure, John.